Let's talk more about this. What's at stake, and break down the political battle over what the EU budget may look like. And for that, we're joined by David Tawil. He is the president of crypto asset fund ProChain Capital. David, thanks so much. This is an interesting story. Talk to me a bit about this proposed shift toward defense and competitiveness, how you believe that could reshape the EU's long-term priorities.
Well, certainly there is a reshuffling of priorities going on all around the world, and largely instigated by President Donald Trump and some of the moves that he has made in terms of tariff proposals and threats, and also in terms of external funding that the U.S. is pulling back on. And so it seems that it's quite clear that there is an incentive to each country around the world to go ahead and double down on defense budgets, and we're seeing those bloated budgets increase all around the world, and that bodes quite well. Obviously I focus on markets.
Right.
That bodes quite well for defense-related companies.
For defense-related companies, but there certainly is not a consensus at this point within the EU. How do you think this is going to shake out? Obviously, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia certainly having an impact, but defense spending, especially among Southern and Western members, how do you think that is going to, in the long run, be resolved?
As with most things in the EU, I think some middle ground will have to be found. Inside of this budget of $2 trillion, there's $100 billion earmarked for Ukraine, which is not an EU member. It is a rising EU member.
Right.
And many EU countries have advocated for the support of Ukraine, and they've advocated very hard for the United States support of Ukraine. And now it's kind of time to put your money where your mouth is, where if you're advocating for support of Ukraine, frankly, you should go ahead and be supportive of this EU budget. The EU budget also provides a tremendous amount of investment into countries like Poland,
right.
But other countries are very much lagging behind. And so there's going to need to be a lot of compromise here in terms of A, shifting of priorities from the last budget until this one, and then B, kind of finding some moderate ground for some new areas of spending like defense.
Yeah, let's kind of connect the dots, because you talked about it, Poland getting more money now. The specific investments to bolster nations that are very close proximity-wise to Ukraine. And there's some obvious concerns that these nations have had about where Vladimir Putin may end up. Poland, Finland, the Baltics, talk about that.
So look, it's quite strategic, as you point out, right? Proximity is very important. And this is about a strategic long-term plan, and I think it's quite wise. Not only does Ukraine need to go ahead and get direct funding, but there needs to be indirect help to Ukraine as well, certainly pulling it away from falling into Russian hands and pulling it further towards the EU, and certainly membership in the EU over time. And I think that that's the right thing. It's just a question of, look, I think everybody in the EU would agree with that ultimate goal. The question is whether it's worth the price, and whether the EU needs to go ahead and sacrifice in the near term from a budgetary perspective for the long-term goal of insulating the EU from Russian influence.
We've talked a lot about armament, but let's talk about space. Why is space so critical to the EU right now? We know it's long had a very active space program, but China has certainly been wildly successful with its program, and the U.S. has branched off in large part to so many private entities.
I mean, the space race is on once again, is really the bottom line answer. It's not so much, I mean, you could chalk it up, from a quick glance at the issue as, a fear of missing out, right? Or following the herd. But the truth of the matter is there's much more to it than that. Because we know that, yes, colonization of the moon or Mars is not really what this is about, in the near to medium term. What it is important scientific discoveries, certainly control of satellite space, and satellite communication is very important as well. And so the EU certainly needs to be part of that contest, so to say, between China and the United States. I mean, Russia has largely fallen out of the conversation, but because in the United States we have, a very robust arm of competition coming from the private sector, that means that the EU has to go ahead and double down on its own efforts.
And David, I'm also really kind of drawn to the fact that more than a third of this budget is earmarked for climate change. How significant do you think that is, especially in the face of the Trump administration pulling the United States out of the Paris Accord and basically having an administration full of deniers saying there's no such thing as climate change as wild storms are wreaking havoc across the U.S.?
So I think it's somewhat breathtaking, and breathtaking in the sense that it's in the face of everything that's going on in the United States in terms of 180-degree change with respect to climate by the presidential administration, from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. It's breathtaking that the EU will continue to go ahead and stick to its principles. I think it's good for them. I think it's going to be difficult from a budgetary perspective to go ahead and stick to those principles. But nonetheless, it believes in those long-term goals. Clearly, climate change is, wreaking havoc across the planet. Even right now, we've got an incredible wildfire raging out in Oregon, and we've seen, record high temperatures across the country during the summer. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to roll any of that stuff back, but certainly we want to make sure it doesn't get any worse. And so kudos to the EU for keeping to its principles. And I assume the EU, when it comes to measures like that, that are very forward-looking, are thinking about successive presidential administrations, right? Trump's administration will only last another 4 years, and then, or 3.5 at this point. Then we will get, potentially a different party elected into office, and so therefore the U.S. position could go ahead and change once again.